Welcome to Acorn to Oak with Penny Quayle Pierce and co-host Matthew Donachie. Within each acorn, there is the DNA that strives to be a mighty oak tree. All it needs to reach its potential for greatness is to be activated. You are the acorn. On this show, we will share with you the tools and guidance you need to grow into the person you are meant to be. And now your host, Penny Quayle Pierce and co-host Matthew Donachie.
Hi, good evening. It's Penny and Matthew. Hope you're doing well. This is going out on the 4th of July, so I just want to wish you all a happy Independence Day. It's not Independence Day, is it? Happy 4th of July, anyway. Us English, honestly, we're absolutely useless. But there you go, such is life. So basically, I'll just hand over to Matthew so he can say hello and I can get my act together. Okay, take care.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you're doing well. It's obviously going out on the 4th of July, so I'm hoping to say that England won the football.
The results aren't in yet, are they? So
no, not currently. So slightly optimistic, but you've got to be optimistic.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I must admit, I'm not really a big football fan, but that's obviously English soccer fan. But it is what it is, and it's always good to have nice competitions where everybody enjoys themselves. So, it is just what it is, isn't it, really?
Yeah, well, I'm not into the male side of football, but watching the females play, the passion and the drive you see on that pitch is far beyond how the professional we were discussing it the other day, and it's kind of like when you're getting $100,000 a week, whether you perform or not, it's like their passion and drive has gone. But with the young teams now, it seems to be very different, especially with the women. It's like they're fighting to be there, which I just think is brilliant. Football for me, watching men is boring. They all just seem to dive on the floor. So it's been really refreshing to see.
Excellent. Women play. Again, as I said, I'm not really a fan, but it is just fantastic, as you say, when you actually see people who are living their passion when they're doing sport. It's quite impressive to see it all. So yeah, just basically catching up with myself here and doing all the technical stuff. So we're here this evening and we're going to be chatting, and I'm going to hand it over to Matthew just to talk about what we're going to be talking about, which is always good.
Yeah, so we're talking about heart-centered living. You may have heard people say ask your heart or heart intelligence, and you may have also wondered, well, what does that actually mean? Now, heart intelligence is what I would class as your emotional self. So the heart has as many neurons in it. It's got as many as the brain. I don't want to be quoted on that, but I don't think it's got as many neurons within it as the brain. But scientists have proved that there are neurons within the heart, and we associate them with thinking or some sort of more intelligence than just a muscle, than just the pump that the heart's said to be. So when people talk about gut feelings and things like that, you can be thinking a situation through your head. But what your gut is telling you, or what I would say your heart is telling you, could be something completely different. So the way I like to sort of explain it is your brain's a computer, and it's a fantastic tool, and it will work out situations and do calculations and any number of wonderful things. The heart is very much like an emotional computer, and it can be quite quite black and white in its truth, that you can ask your heart a direct question around how you feel around a situation, and you'll get a direct answer. So for me, the heart is like the emotional computer within you. Um, and I live a heart by making a decision, no matter how big or small. I'll let my brain think about it. And obviously, you can rush if there's budgeting involved, do that with the brain. But then I'll check in with my heart and ask whether this is the right thing to do, or whether this is the next move I need to take. So if you imagine you're buying a house, and you could write down a list of pros and cons as to why this house would work. It's more for me about checking in with the heart and saying, is this house right for me? And it's that intelligence that we're going to be talking about tonight. That gives you a good idea of what we're going to be covering.
I think for me also, coming obviously from the medical background that I come from, we, as Matthew was saying, we've got just as many neurons in our heart and also in our gut. So when we actually turn around and say, I'm going with my gut feeling, don't think there's no neurons down there to actually do that intuitive thinking that the gut has. So, yes, we were talking about following a path with heart, and it's just, the heart is, as I said, full of neurons. It has its own intelligence, and from an energetic point of view, obviously has its own energy field and vibration. And we forget that, so we've got three centers that are actually doing our thinking and our intuitive thinking and leading to levels of consciousness as well. So when you talk about following a heart, a path with heart, we have to understand the whole process of making war, and the war is within us and without us, and how it begins and ends. Wars are rooted in ignorance and misunderstanding. And, without understanding, it can be easy for us to become frightened by the fleeting changes that happen in our outside world, and the inevitable loss and disappointments and insecurity of aging and death, and not just of ourselves, but obviously our loved ones also. And this understanding leads to the fight against life. Running from the pain or grasping at security, looking at pleasures, fleeting pleasures that by their nature are never going to be able to truly satisfy us. Our war against life is expressed in every single dimension of our experience, both inner and outer. Our children see on average 18,000 murders and violent acts on the TV before they finish school. The leading cause of injury for women in the West and East is the beatings by men they live with, but also women beating men and committing verbal violence. We carry on these wars within ourselves, our families, our communities, amongst races and nationwide. But the war between peoples are just reflecting our own inner conflicts and fear. And, when we actually get out of our own personal dramas and we start realizing that, who we are affects the global community, it makes us realize that in looking at heart intelligence, looking at following a path with heart affects all of us. We are a global community. We're not living in isolation. And we think, well, we'll just take care of our needs and, sausages to everybody else. Whereas in fact, actually, it is the interconnections between us in energy, which is giving us the global consciousness that we're having now, that it's okay to make war. It's okay to have people starving on the planet, when in fact, an awful lot of us live with plenty. And, it's about time, and a path, the path with a heart is actually taking a stand and going, actually, it's about time we started looking after the whole family. And when I'm talking about looking after the whole family, I'm talking global. There shouldn't be people who have to drink dirty water. There shouldn't be people who are in suffering and pain. It's about, growing up as the human race growing up and saying, it's about time we say no to this. It's about time we started actually looking after the elderly, looking after the people who can't look after themselves, looking at, the third world, looking at just sharing, learning to share, truly learning how to share. And for me, this is what makes it, as you can probably hear by my voice, but this is what makes me absolutely passionate. It's like, hello, let's wake up. Let's take care of what we've got. Because if we don't take care of what we've got with our hearts, then it's going to crash and burn, and more people are going to have to live in suffering when there is no need. So just handing back to Matthew so he can put his two pennies worth in.
Yeah, I think it's really important that for everyone to realise that not only can this make a difference within your own life to deal with sort of the emotional baggage of your past, but as a collective, if we were all more mindful and we all learned how to live in the heart and trust that life would be a very different place. I mean, I think we've said on previous shows, man spent hundreds of billions of dollars trying to get into space and discover the universe, but then we still have hunger and we still have homeless. And you think, we have sayings like charity starts at home. Well, we should say charity starts with your own planet, because that's where we really need to get back to and realise that, I mean, like you said, with the elderly people, we've only got the freedom in our lives because they've given up some of the freedom in their lives. And so to hear sort of the elderly being sick and not looked after, I think it's terrible. And everyone just seems to shun it and sort of shove it under the carpet and say, oh, well, there's nothing we can do, and that's life and that's how the world is. And it's kind of like, it is only as long as we allow that. And if enough people start living a certain way or start having a certain view, it does become a movement, and then a movement turns into something that is life-changing. And I think it's we're in that very close time at the moment, especially with everything that's going on with the environment and that sort of thing. It's things are really shaking up at the moment. It's really quite an exciting time to be alive, because there's so many things within humanity that I think are going to take a big change. So
I think,
really
it is exciting. Some of the changes have been exciting, but it's also, basically there's quite a few people who are actually saying no to an awful lot of things. Is the status quo just going to be the status quo, or am I actually going to be somebody who shakes it up? And let's have a little bit of, world changers, people who are passionate to put their lives into profound service, so that the others will one of the biggest diseases on this planet right here, right now, in this time, is apathy. People who couldn't be bothered, who don't want to shake up the status quo, who don't want to put their heads above the pulpit or the wall because they're frightened they're going to get shot or whatever it is. And it's going to need, we need to grow game changers. We need to encourage, epic spiritual entrepreneurs. We need to encourage people who just turn around and want to make an impact in this world by putting themselves in service to, the global community and just getting people to think about it. It was really quite interesting. This week has been an interesting week for me. We've had a lot of change at home. My childcare lady has changed, so one is going into nursing and another one has just come on board, and she's a lovely lass. She's 22, and we were just talking about my son and why he is, some of the reasons why he is the way he is. And as a homeopath, I took the decision that he wasn't going to be vaccinated. And he's a very energetic, lively, happy little boy, outstandingly so. And he's very articulate. You can see him thinking things through, and it's like he does a health and safety audit on whether I should take that leap off the trampoline or not, and you can see him work it through and go, no, I can manage that, and then he does it. And it's really interesting to see him alongside some of the other children who have gone through vaccinations. And I said, vaccination in the 50s, the 60s and the 70s was crucial, because we had diseases that needed to be vaccinated against. But actually nowadays, there aren't the diseases unless they're in labs and being researched on. We don't have the disease processes in the West that we need to vaccinate so strongly against. And, when you look at the big picture and you realize that the correlation between vaccinations and the huge amount of autoimmune diseases that are now present on the planet, and you look at it and go, ooh, there's something going on here. And, for me, obviously, with my background in science, and I just look at it and I said, yeah, there is no such thing as a coincidence. If we're having huge amounts of new autoimmune diseases since we started vaccinating, there's a key there. There's a root cause there. And you look at it, and I get horrified, I must admit, with the amount of new vaccinations there are on, and the governments are actually persuading us to give them to our children or our teenagers. Teenage girls now are being given vaccinations to stop cervical cancer, and they're looking at ones for breast cancer, and they're just not realizing that they're introducing a foreign protein into your physical being, and that foreign protein is going to have side effects. And those side effects are going to cause breakdown in immunity and breakdown, and this is where I was talking about war, introducing war into our children, whilst, their immune systems are warring against white blood cells, red blood cells. They're causing untold damage. And we haven't done the research. We haven't done the research which is going to show us whether this is causing it or not. And, we blindly say, oh yeah, that sounds like, I need to have my child vaccinated, or this, or that, or I need to take the antibiotics, or I need to take statins because my cholesterol is bad. And the absolute correlation between statins and Alzheimer's and dementia is been long proved, yet we still stuff statins into people's mouths and say, take it because your cholesterol is high. And, not thinking of the long-term consequences, not looking at the big picture, not actually saying it might be a good idea to somebody and allowing them to make the choices. Again, it was really interesting. A few years ago, they tried to. I had a little bit of a macular bleed, which is just behind the eye. One of the veins basically popped, and I had a little bit of a bleed. And I was obviously sent to the eye hospital and had all of the tests and this, that, and the other. And they said, well, you've got a couple of choices. We can give you injections into the eye, which are steroids, and something else. And I just said, okay, well, hand me the data about this injection. And halfway down the list, it wasn't the last thing, it was halfway down the list of side effects, was sudden death. And I thought, hello. Right, I'm going to be taking that one then, and basically said to the medics, forget it, I'm not taking that. Anyway, so we'll see you on the other side of the break.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
I'm Kathy Williams, host of Sexy Mom Abundant Life radio show on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. On the show, we explore living abundantly in every area of your life. Ways to let go of limiting patterns and beliefs and to step into the flow of creativity and possibility, knowing you are supported by the universe.
We are talking about your life. Ever wonder, is this as good as it gets? No, it could be so much better. At Acorn to Oak, we know you are seeking more happiness, joy, unconditional love, financial freedom, passion, and purpose. Find your unique mojo and live an extraordinary life. Want to know more? Contact us at our website, acorntooak.org.uk.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
Hi and welcome back. I suppose talking a bit further on, it was really quite interesting in one of the London newspapers, and this was probably about maybe 10 years ago, maybe even longer than that. And they did obviously there's a column in the paper with the deaths, the births, and deaths, births and weddings, that's right. And they actually had something in the death part of the page. Obviously they hadn't got very many deaths to talk about, and they actually had a write-up on the death of common sense. And it was really quite, I can't remember the whole thing, but it was highly amusing to the people, obviously, who read it. And the Telegraph paper in the UK is quite it's one of the top papers in the country. So an awful lot of people read it, and it was quite amazing how many people, put their thumbs up and went, yeah, we agree with that. Common sense seems to go out of the window when we're having these internal battles with self. And Chris was just sharing on us on the break, when you have to have a warning on a superhero costume, making sure that people say, wearing this costume doesn't allow you to fly. You won't be able to suddenly fly. And we were all of us were laughing about it and went, yeah, it's really hilarious that, people have to put warnings on superhero costumes. But that's how ridiculous our world has become on occasions. You just look at it and go, one of my favourite sayings is, really? You really think that? Or are you really going to do that? And because we've all been, hypnotised into, taking authority and thinking they're telling us the truth without using our own innate intelligence. And, following a path with heart is actually, again, it's taking responsibility for ourselves and the decisions we make. And, looking at everybody else, with a skeptical look on our face going, that may be your opinion or that may be your perception, but it's not mine. Hang on a minute. If I'm being told a load of baloney, well, why am I swallowing it? And, that's one of the things I think at Acorn to Acorn we would love to get over during these shows is whatever you do, don't take anything anybody else says to you at face value. Always do your own research. Always look into it yourself. And if it doesn't go right with your gut and your heart and your head, for heaven's sake, just don't do it. But we feel like we're being pushed into a cattle market, and you have to do this at different stages in our lives. Children of this age need to take exams so that they can be streamlined into the careers that people think that they should have. And if they're good at sports, then obviously they're going to be encouraged into sports and stuff like this. And if you're good at math, then you're going to become an accountant, whether you like it or not. And there's all sorts of screaming, and we're not allowing the individual to grow at the pace that they need to grow at. And I suppose I'm so passionate about this because I was dyslexic, and I'm still dyslexic, but I've got strategies in place, and I couldn't read until I was 13, and people just turned around and looked at me and went, oh, Penny, she's thick. Whereas in fact it had got nothing to do with my intelligence level. It had got to do with my perception and how I perceived language and how I perceived different letters. I've gone on, I'm an author of 3 books. I run a successful training company. I've gone on to talk, to teach hundreds of people. I couldn't do that if I didn't have my innate intelligence and be able to use my heart intelligence as well as my rational mind. But we get pinholed into different things. And that doesn't mean that we can't change and grow as long as we allow ourselves to do that instead of being sat on by authority or authority figures. So I've had a little bit of a rant, so I'll let Matthew put his two penny worth it.
Yeah, I think such great points, and I think as a race or as a whole planet, it's almost standing up and saying, "Look, we've made some mistakes here." Because, like you were saying, a lot of the diseases that we have in modern day, we didn't have 100, 200 years ago, and it's certainly not something they have in some of the indigenous tribes that are still around in sort of cut-off areas. And I've watched the program. David Attenborough's our king of sort of the planet on natural animals,
natural world,
indigenous tribes. Yeah, and he was saying that actually a lot of the indigenous tribes won't allow sort of modern people into their village because we bring disease and we bring suffering which is something they're not aware of. It's not something they experience. Of course, we're all going to have certain issues, dental issues and that sort of thing. We all have teeth. If we don't look after them, we're going to have dental issues. But when you look at the diseases that we have in the modern world now, I would say, and I just assume that, but I would say half of them are probably caused by the drugs that we're shoving into people's bodies and the chemicals that we're using to combat different things. So you watch an advert for a medication, 90% of the advert's telling you what the side effects are, not what the drug actually does for you. So we're sort of throwing things out, and we don't, very much like Penny said, we don't know what the repercussions are until 10, 15, 20 years later, when we discover that it's actually massively harmful. Take something like asbestos. In the 60s, 70s and 80s, asbestos was one of the largest used construction materials in the UK and around the world. And it was only 20, 30 years later, when hundreds of thousands of people have died from it, that we did the tests and realised it's actually a toxic material. And we're covering buildings and houses and all of these things in this material that at the time, it was after the war, so it was a cheap, easy material to construct. But they didn't think of the repercussions then. And I mean, the 10, 20 years when we were using it and everyone's saying it's a great product, this is exactly the same as we're doing with the drugs, the things that we're throwing in our bodies.
Well, it's not just the drugs either, Matthew. It's, when you actually look at modern farming methods, the big fields, the getting rid of the the shrub row. I could get my teeth back in. But you're looking at it, and you're looking at, genetically enhanced crops, yakka. These were all started off again back in the 60s and 70s. It was an experiment. They were meant to be doing an experiment to see if they could produce more from this modern way of farming. And sure. In between that, in the 1950s, if you had one apricot, it was really nutritious. It had all the vitamins. It was allowed to ripen on the vine, etc. So they were power packed, full of all of the wonderful nutrients that we need. And research has stated quite plainly that to get the same nutritional content of that one apricot, you'd need to be eating 56 apricots now because of the lack of the nutritional content. And you just look at it and go, wow, when are these guys going to wake up to the fact that this experiment in modern farming techniques just hasn't worked? because even the way that they plough the land, in olden days, that sounds like I'm talking about the 1800s, but they used to plough the land around the contours of the field, and in doing that, the nutrients were not washed out by rain. They were actually retained in the fields. Whereas now you've got these acre fields, 10 or 15 acre fields, where they're just ploughing up and down, and they're not doing it to the contour. They're actually, what they're making is like a rivers, where all of the nutrients in the actual soil are washed out and go into the nearest river and kill most of the fish, or whatever actually happens. But it's really interesting to realise that governments need to, or the Department of Agriculture or whatever, just need to say, hang on, guys. We're losing the nutrients. The food doesn't have the nutritional value that it had 20 or 30 years ago. We need to look at this and maybe realise that we need to be more organic and holistic in our farming methods. And I know people, different pockets around the world are beginning to do that, and they're beginning to see that things are actually coming back into homeostasis or back into balance. And it's the same, when you look at it and just go, well, the hedgerow is gone and everybody's panicking because the bee population has dropped 65% on the planet. Therefore, the crops are not being pollinized the way that they used to. And we're just looking at it and going, why are we messing around with nature? Nature's got it covered. It's when man suddenly decides they know better that we actually start getting into problems. And this is why, again, I'm so passionate about discussing a path with the heart. The heart knows that we need to take care of our planet. The head is just raping it for its resources, and it really does. I can rant on about this not just for an hour. I can do it for days, but it's when we actually really begin to look at it. And start taking responsibility, and the responsibility lies with all of us to do something in our own unique way, which if we allow our own unique ways to come together, it's pure genius, and we will start really beginning to change and say to the governments, this is not good enough. We need to stop this. And what is so fantastic is, the youth, the teenagers, the youth actually get this much more than us as adults. They really turn around and go, what's happening to the snow leopards? What's happening to the different species that are being overhunted, and therefore they're on the brink of extinction. So again, it's handing back to Matthew to see his thoughts on this.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when you have these chats and different things come in, because the thing that ties everything together and is the common it's the common thing that all of these things that thank you that we've been talking about. So the drugs that we supply for different things, and it all comes down to money at the end of the day. For me, or that's how it seems. It's the reason they first wanted to start seeing if we could produce more crops is because they said we need more crops to feed people, and this is why we're doing it, and we're doing it to try and produce more effective vegetables and that sort of thing. That's not true. That what they're actually doing is trying to produce more crops for less money. and try and sell more. It all comes down to greed, and I think if I'm guilty just as much as everybody else. We get set in this way that money has this or has this power over us almost, that we get sort of starry-eyed and think, oh well, we need money to be successful, and it's like the race has gone crazy on greed. You look at some of the way people treat each other in the street over money and things, and for me, it is that common denominator that everything comes down to, and I think that's how mankind has got lost. We've got lost in that greed, in the delusion of sort of making money and doing well and all this, and very much if you tuned into your head on a certain situation, your head may tell you to go for it because you could make X amount of money, which means you could retire at a certain age or whatever it is. Whereas if you ask your heart may give you a no, just because it doesn't feel right. Because earning money is great. However, do you feel good about how you've earned your money? Did it serve people? And did it serve more people than yourself? Whereas most people are thinking, well, I can make 50% on everything I sell, and it's just that greed element, and I think that's where humans have really got quite lost on it a little bit.
I think for me, for me also, it's the lack of compassion towards each other. We know we have food mountains in Europe. I don't know what it's like in the United States, where people have produced, depending on obviously what season it is, and we have a multitude of food stored in warehouses, slowly rotting, but we're freezing it or we're keeping it chilled so it lasts longer. Why on earth are we not sharing this with the third world? I'm sorry, but if there's people, nobody on this planet should be starving. We produce enough food to feed the world, and it is unfortunately governments we're not going to give it to them. They're going to have to buy it, and if that country is not obviously financially stable enough to bring in goods from overseas, then we refuse to give it to them for free. And you just look at it and it wastes and it rots. And, you just look at it and go, well, if they spread it on the fields as manure, maybe we can get the nutrients back. Hey, that's an idea. And it's just looking at it and just going, it is so bizarre the way that we have allowed, as human beings, we have allowed governments and things to control us. Whereas, there's nothing like a good revolution every now and again. And actually turning around to the governments and saying, no, this is ridiculous. It just doesn't make any sense. And if you connected all of the dots, it would be a clown's face, making a fool out of you and a fool out of me. And you just look at it and go, but the one thing that we've lost in our society today is the ability to communicate. And, it's communicating to each other and just going, actually, that's not me. I don't want to buy into that. That's actually rubbish. And, as we lose, it's the technological age, technology, is because we're communicating by text or by WhatsApp or by Instagram or Facebook or, and we're not actually sitting down with each other and talking and really getting to the nitty gritty of conversation, we don't know how other people are thinking. And if that's how we are controlled, is, isolate everybody. They don't know, if we actually allow people to come together and converse, more people are going to turn around and go, yeah, why is that? What's this about? What's that about? Can you explain this to me? And people who have a little bit more life experience can help and bring enlightenment to other people. We can teach our kids better manners. We can turn around to them and say, you can choose your own path. You don't have to listen to the teachers or the career counsellors or whatever it is. And actually getting people to start saying, hang on a minute, why is this happening? What are we not seeing? And allowing ourselves to lift out of our own personal stuff that's going on and see a bigger, brighter view of the whole of humanity. And that's my take on it. It doesn't need to be your take on it, but it's just really, beginning those conversations so we can get people to engage, which will then make them less apathetic and more wanting to be part of the conversation. So, those are my thoughts on it. What's your thoughts on it, Matthew?
Totally agree. When you said you like the sound of a revolution, I mean, I think we're very much in that at the moment. I don't know if the Americans know too much about what's going on in England at the moment, but we're having this Brexit going on, and it's a long story, but I'll make it brief. We joined the European Union. It hasn't worked out for us as we had hoped. More of the country have said that we would like to leave than had said that they want to remain. The government had made so many deals and so many what we call brown envelopes, which is something you get passed, which is usually full of money, and you don't say anything about it, but the deal happens. And it's been so clear to me that the government have made so many deals behind our backs with various different other prime ministers saying, yes, we can do this and yes, we can do that, that when England said we want to leave, the government suddenly went, oh shit, well that's not in our plan, because actually their plan was completely different to the plan that they were selling us. So governments can be very dishonest and hide things. And this whole thing has been going on for, almost a year now, isn't it? And
2 years, really, yeah.
The government have made, 2 years, made side deals that they haven't told us about. They're the ones that have been dishonest. So we can't even make a simple decision on what's going to happen now. And I think it's almost global. We need to be firm on our decisions. And if you don't agree with some of the things that the government are saying, like we have to live by the law. However, we don't have to live by any rules that's set by a government or anything like that. We can choose to live a different way, and I think the more people stand up, and you're seeing it, especially around the environmental stuff, where people are standing up and actually speaking their truth, rather than just buying into the fear of what we're told, and being worried about what will people say if we did stand up and speak our truth. And I think that's what stops a lot of people. It's just the fear around, am I going to be made to be a scapegoat? Am I making any sense in the first place? And even just having people in fear, living in fear, is stopping them from living their full potential.
So whatever you do, just allow yourself to have some great conversations and enjoy your life, whether you're pontificating or whether you've got some really good points to get across. The more we talk, the more we learn. So have a great week and enjoy the 4th of July. Take care.
Look forward to speaking to you next week. Get out of those heads and into those hearts.